be a miracle. Up to this point, I would have been reluctant to call it a miracle, because I wasn't sure what a miracle was. I knew it was something extraordinary. Maybe I would call it something exceptional, which meant it was an exception to the rule. But I was pretty unclear about what a miracle was. I did know that science helped me identify it as something that happens kind of not like natural law. You know, natural law is just the way everything normally happens. That's natural law. Things happen a certain way. And in my mind, science has helped me to identify a miracle as something that didn't happen the normal way. It was outside of the bounds of natural law, and that kind of defined a miracle. And so I tried to understand what it means to talk to you about a miracle. It's not a word that I have used very much. In fact, most of the time I use it, I'll use it kind of flippantly, like it's a miracle I didn't get a speeding ticket or something like that. You know? You ever go through one of those things and say, "He's got me, I know that." Something like that. Or I didn't use the word at all. But this morning, if I could, I'd like to restore for me and you the understanding, if we could, about what a miracle is. I went back to the original definition, which is always a good practice. Got a great dictionary that 2 volumes. I love it. Thanks to Jackie Hatcher. And I went back and looked up the original meaning of the word miracle. And it's surprising, it doesn't have a scientific meaning at all. In fact, it has a religious, theological meaning. The original definition of a miracle was anything that causes a sense of awe, A-W-E. Anything that literally causes you to step back and go, wow, or to wonder. One of the definitions was to literally to cause you to marvel, to go, wow, something has just happened here. At the bottom line, and I want you to get this point, I want you to get the story I want to share. At the bottom line, for Christians, anything that increases our personal awareness of God is a miracle. Did you hear that? Anything that increases our personal awareness of God in our lives in a concrete kind of way is a miracle. The word's found 31 times in the New Testament, and usually it'll be the word that's used. It doesn't always say miracle. The word that's most common used is the little word sign. You got a sign. The common New Testament word for miracle is the word sign. So I try to understand that because it's important for me to know what happened to me and what we can expect as we go forward. And the sign is literally the way by which a person or a thing can be identified. I'm going to give you an illustration that will help you understand what a sign is. In the last 6 months, Alex and Jill have begun to come. And I love Alex and Jill. They're twins. You know, they look exactly alike. There they are. Hi, girls. Now, not everybody thinks they look exactly alike because you know them better than I do, but as far as I'm concerned, they look exactly alike, except Jill has a little sign. Jill has a little mole above her eye. And that is the identifying mark on her body. If you can get close enough to see it, then that's Jill instead of Alex. Good luck today distinguishing apart. But that is literally almost the word, the definition of the word sign or miracle in the New Testament. That something happens, some mark is on that event, so you cannot miss the fact that God showed up. That's what it is. There's a mark on that event that says, God was here. And I marvel at that, and I'm amazed at that, and I stand back and I'm in awe at that. There's a number of signs in the Bible. The rainbow was a sign in the sky. God showed up. The blood over the doorpost was a sign that the death angel was going to pass by. All of those things. Circumcision was a mark for a Hebrew man to identify that he was one of the people of God. All of those were signs and markers of the presence and the activity of God. Literally, a sign, a miracle, is an identifying mark that God has been on the scene. I'm excited about that. The Bible's not preoccupied with how that miracle came about. All they know is that God was there. I'll give you an illustration. Probably the biggest miracle in the Scripture is when the people of God had been in bondage in Egypt. And God sent Moses and said, let my people go. You know that story. Let them out. came to the Red Sea, and the Red Sea's parted, they went through the other side, the Egyptians were all destroyed. It was probably the identifying miracle of the Scriptures, especially the Old Testament. But you got to read that whole story. Exodus chapter 14 tells what happens. You know, Moses didn't just walk up to the water and go, bing, and everything went. You know what Scripture says? 14:12 Exodus. The night before, a strong east wind blew all night long. All night long. The wind blew, and the wind blew, and the wind blew, and the wind blew. And by morning, the sea had been parted, and the land was dry, and the people of God could go through to the other side. So often, you see, we really, really missed it in this whole idea of a miracle. We think it's got to be something that just bings in from the outside, and it's this exceptional, extraordinary, ordinary, never seen it to happen before. It doesn't work like bing, and we miss that in the everyday, ordinary events of life, when the wind is blowing, God works miracles. So you can say today, am I here today because God worked a miracle or because of CPR? And I'm going to tell you, it's because of both. You see, God's not concerned about what the source of that is. He just knows. There are times in our lives where there's an identifying mark that says Jesus was there. Sometimes He's there in very, very, very ordinary ways. It's not always some big lightning out of the sky. Somebody showed up and did their job, and it made the difference between life and death. And it was such an identifying moment that we had to say, it was a miracle. It was a miracle. And so my hope today is when you leave out of here in a little few minutes, that you'll go away believing that you can be open in a brand new way to miracles. Not just those extraordinary things that might happen in a way you've never seen them happen before, you never expected them before, but maybe in some ordinary, common way with the people you walk with and live with, God will show up and do some things through the people of your life, and you'll say, God has been here, and even that was miraculous. 2 Sundays ago, we celebrated our 25th anniversary here at the church. It was a great time, and we enjoyed it, needless to say. And we decided at the end of that day to go see our moms. Our moms live about 105 miles away. It takes about an hour and 45 minutes to get there, and 2 or 3 times every second or third week we try to go and see them and check on them and basically get a free meal probably more than anything else. This particular time I had a whole stack full of gift cards from restaurants because you've given us cards to celebrating 25 years and so on. Most of the cards were for $25, which is a good deal. And so we had a stack of them, and we decided on Monday we're going to take moms out for lunch and just celebrate a little bit and come back home that same day, no big deal. And so we drove after journey groups on Sunday night, got home about 10 o'clock. It had been a long day. I was exhausted, wanted to go to bed, and I did. Boom, went to bed. That's what I do. You know, so that's the way it works. Monday morning, 2 weeks ago tomorrow, pretty routine for me. My alarm went off at 5, it normally does. Cheap crickets on my iPhone. Time to get up. So I got up and went in and sat down in my mom's dining room and began my study. And it's good. You should have a morning study. I don't mean to get moral now, but you should. I hung on to this as my notes from that morning. I thought if I'd have died that day, my kids would have said, that's what my dad was doing all morning long. That's what he was doing this morning before he died. It had been keepsake because somewhere it says, Lord, I invite you into every single moment of this day, written down that morning in my early morning study time, along with about 400 verses that I reviewed in my mind to make sure I didn't forget what they said. So it was a pretty good investment that morning, you know. So I had from about 5 o'clock till 7:45 that nobody bothered me, which was pretty good. Heard a little stirring in the back room. It looked like we may have a chance for breakfast. And in fact, we did. Homemade cinnamon rolls and coffee. They weren't all that great, just ask my mother, she'll tell you. She wished 1,000 times she'd fix gravy and biscuits, and I did too. It's true, isn't it, Mother? Well, I decided I'd probably, we had to make a major decision that morning before we did anything else. and that is where we're going to have lunch. And so we decided that. It didn't take us too long. We were going to lunch at 1 o'clock together with Anita's mom and my mom and Anita and I. And so we had that done. Now I had some time on my hands and thought it'd be a good chance to go to the YMCA and work out a little bit. I really wasn't interested in working out very much. I really just wanted to get in the sauna. It was a cold morning, and that sauna, it was about 150 degrees in there, buddy. And I'm telling you, it just sounded perfect. So I convinced my wife I would be back on time, and I headed to the YMCA. It's only about 5 minutes away. Went to the front desk and swiped my little card, and they said, "Oh, your card won't work here." Oh, no. But it was obvious they were going to let me in. I filled out a little registration card, and I knew then they were going to let me come in, so it was okay. And I put down for my emergency contact number my own cell phone number. Because I really wasn't interested in it. I just wanted to get into the sauna. That's the only reason I was there. Really. And so I put that down, and so I went and put my sweatshirt and my keys in the locker room, came straight to the sauna, stayed in there 5 minutes, just long enough to have sweat pouring off the backs of my hands. Went straight to the treadmill. Jogged on the treadmill for only a mile. I only had a few minutes. Spent a few minutes on the treadmill. Then I came back out, went to the men's room, and I was going to spend 4 more minutes in the sauna. I mean, I've kind of got an addiction, I think, So stepped out of the men's shower room, and when I did, I said, "Ooh, I feel dizzy." That was it. No signs, no warnings, no chest pain. I've been running on the treadmill, jogging. I don't run. I didn't hurt. I hadn't been hurting. I've been trying to exercise more. I probably walked and ran 20 miles that week in the gym. And so, I hadn't had any difficulty that I know of. And now I just stepped out of the bathroom and felt dizzy and immediately went to the floor. Neil Carlson had come to exercise, and he was there a little bit late, and he was right inside the door, and I literally fell right in the doorway of the men's locker room, just right in the doorway. So Neil came to the door, he didn't really know what to do. And he said, I was still alert at that time. I didn't remember that. But he said I was alert at that time, and Neil promised me, I will not leave you alone. And the whole thing's on videotape, the YMCA. I haven't chosen to watch it, but the whole thing's on the tape. He promised he would not leave me alone, and he began to cry out for help. And so in about a minute and a half, the lady at the front desk, Della, came running down the hallway with her cell phone, with her portable phone in her hand, trying to figure out what's going on. And so she calls 911, and they begin to try to recruit help for me. Gary Ford, not Gary Ford number 1, but Gary Ford number 2, Gary Ford number 2 had just finished his workout. In fact, he'd been smart aleck with me. I came in to get on the treadmill, and I think he thinks he's hot stuff or something. I don't know, So I was just kind of jogging away at about 4.7 on the treadmill, and this guy from the side over there said, if you get that piano off your back, you can run better. And I thought, who is this guy? Then he looked up and said, oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were somebody else. Same guy. So Gary had finished his workout, and he was in the YMCA and had taken a shower. He had sweatpants on, didn't have a shirt on. He came running out of the locker room. And he and Della agreed together. Della said, I've got a torn rotator cuff. I can't do the chest compressions, but I can do the breathing. And I'll do the mouth-to-mouth if you'll do the chest compressions. And the two of them started. And they worked for 7.5 minutes until the EMTs got there. And Gary says, I don't know how Della did what Della did, because she patted on me and loved on me and said, come on back, come on back, come on back. And my eyes never closed, my eyes never blinked. And she gave mouth-to-mouth to what I think was a dead man for 7 minutes. I don't know that I would have done that, but she did. And the two of them together worked and worked and worked, and Della began to say, I don't know who this guy is. He doesn't come to our life. I don't know who he is. So they went back to the, I'm getting away from my notes here, I have to be careful. They went back to to the desk to try to find out who I was. And they found out they had 2 guests there that day. Both of them were from Louisville. And so they Googled my name on Google, and it came up on our webpage, and there was the picture and said, that's him, that's Harry Curry, that's him. And so the lady at the front desk, actually one of the guys in Y, called my cell phone number. Yeah. Fortunately, I left my cell phone at my mother's house. So the thing's just riddled with miracles. And so my wife saw the cell phone and said, I don't know that number, I ain't answering that. So she did answer. Well, you know, they called right back. She said, maybe I better answer that. And they asked if Harry Curry was her husband, and she said yes. And they said, is he at the Y? And she said yes. And they said, are you in Louisville? And she said, no, I'm in Richmond. And they said, can you come to the hospital? And she said, I guess I can. And they said, we are taking him to the hospital. And when we left, he had no pulse. And so she's going, what just happened? And so the whole process continued to work. It's amazing during that time, one of the young guys, I found out later when they began to watch the videos, the guy at the Y said he watched it the first time, he didn't notice it. Second time he watched it, there were some things around the edges that he hadn't noticed before. There was a man there that had been working out, his name's Mike Herndon. Mike and BJ, husband and wife, were there working out. And a young man went running down the hall to the front desk to try to find out if the EMTs had arrived yet. And Mike was in the hallway and asked what happened. And he went running back to this little narrow locker room area. And the young man said, there's no reason for you to go back there. They've got all the help they need. There's really nothing you can do. He said, oh yes, there is something I can do. I'm going back to pray. And for 7 minutes, he stood at the head of my little body on the floor and walked and prayed and walked and prayed. And he said, 3 different times they lost you. And I would pray, and you'd come back, and I'd celebrate, and they'd lose you again. And I'd pray, and you'd come back, and they'd celebrate. His wife was around the corner in the little foyer, on her hands and knees with her face on the ground, all 8 minutes, praying that somehow God would intervene and make provision for me that I might live. Amazing, amazing to me that these people would care that much about me, that they didn't even know. And so after about 7 or 8 minutes, the EMS shows up, and they actually send 2 teams because it's a code, and they know that somebody's not breathing. And so a couple of girls, Marissa and Lauren, come, and Marissa immediately, I guess, relieves Gary, jumps on and starts doing cut chest compressions, and doesn't make any headway. And if you don't think I'm sore, you're crazy. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. My heart feels fine, but my rib cage is messed up, buddy. I'm telling you. Woo! And so Marissa doesn't make a lot of headway. And then Lauren, who is, I understand, Judge Jennings' stepdaughter, Lauren kind of just steps over top of my body like this, squats down on top of me, and look out. Here she goes. Bam! And somewhere along the way, I begin to get a pulse. And so they brought the paddles, put one up here and one down here. I only know because I had no, it was this way, because I had the big sponges on me. Bam! Hit me with electricity. That's really, the divine intervention probably happened right there. Because at that point, my heart went immediately back into rhythm. That is what I understand typically doesn't happen. I had an artery in the front of my heart that was clogged. I didn't know that. It had been a long process of clogging. I guess that morning it completely filled up. And so it allowed my heart to be in what they call VFib, which is it just gets full of blood and they can't get the blood out. So your heart just does nothing but sits there and vibrates just like that. It's not flatlined yet, but it just did this. There's no beating. It's just doing this because it's completely full of blood and it cannot pump it out and it cannot pump more in. It's completely done. And it was in VFib for 7 full minutes. Then, when the paddles kicked me, somehow, miraculously, my heart went back into what they call sinus rhythm or normal rhythm, and it began to beat normally again. It was unbelievable. I don't know. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my place here, so I'm going to try to go on the best I can. Well, during that time, they had put a tube down my throat because I wasn't breathing. Well, you know what happens when you wake up and you got a tube down your throat? You want to get it out. So we had a fight immediately. I don't know with who. But the guy EMT was there and said we had a fight, and he was all over me. Finally, he literally threw his body over top of me, completely over top of me on the stretcher, grabbed the stretchers on the other side, and held me down. Because evidently they put their little tube in, and it has an inflatable ball on the bottom of it, and so it won't come out. And I was trying, and they said, literally, if I pulled it out, it would have ripped the esophagus, and ripped your whole in, if I could have gotten it out. So they deflated the ball, thanks be to God, and they got that thing out of my mouth. I don't remember any of that. Thank you, Lord. So I'm now on the stretcher. The tube is out of my mouth. My heart is beating irregularly, and they put me in the ambulance. And I'm beginning to interact with them. They said I gave them my name, my address, my cell phone number, my social security number, and they're all amazed. I don't remember any of that, but they're all amazed. Anita's now on her way to the hospital. And as she's making her way, she didn't tell my mom everything about what had happened because she didn't think my mom would be able to drive. And on the way, Sean called. Said, Miss Curry, this is Sean from the ER. Are you aware of the fact that your husband is in the emergency room? Well, yes, I'm aware. Well, I'll tell him that you know and you're on the way. And she said, excuse me, what did you say? She said, well, he gave me your phone number, and I'll tell him you're on the way. And she said, whoa, he gave the nurse my phone number. So she began to be a little bit hopeful that there was some form of life there, and so she came. By the time we get into the ER, Anita's trying to get hold of the kids and let them know before Facebook announces to the world that I'm dead already. Who was it, Carl? Carl Hurley said the news of my death has been largely exaggerated. So she's trying to get a hold of kids, and Gary, my brother, is in the ER with me, and I don't remember any of that. I said, what did we talk about? He said, you wanted to know 1,000 times what's my blood pressure. What's my heart rate? I've been around the hospital too much. What's my oxygen saturation? What's it look like? Asking us questions, you know. Then finally, I got bold enough to ask him straightforward. Did they have to shock me? He said, I determined if you were going to answer directly, I had to answer directly. If you're going to answer directly, I had to answer directly. And so I said, yes, they did have to shock your heart. And he said, I just kept saying, amazing. That's amazing. It's amazing. Well, about that time, I woke up in the ER. And it's the strangest thing, you know. I've been through all this stuff now, and I just tell you, I had nothing to do with it. Every saving event that happened in my life in that time, I had nothing to do with it. I was on the floor. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything. I didn't help anybody. I didn't do nothing to help myself. I was totally picked up by the Lord and by His people. That's all that happened. Amen. So I woke up in the ER and I wondered, who am I here to visit? That's what I do all the time. I'm like, who's sick? I got to look around thinking, I don't know anybody. There must be somebody in here. And about that time I realized it was me in the bed. I said, hey, there are my feet in this bed. And so I began to take note of the fact that I was in the hospital. And I remember my mother taking off my shoes in the ER, and that's about it. But amazingly, I was stable. My blood pressure was good. My pulse was good. My oxygen was good. My enzymes for a heart attack were not up yet. They went up the next round a little bit, but not too high. And so they decided to ship me upstairs to ICU and leave me there for a little bit and see what would come next. My brother Randy came back, and you got to know Randy. They came in to get some information about me, and he said, "You ain't going to do that right now. So you just have to come back later." You know, I thought we were going to have a major family fight right back there, you know, in the whole place. And before I went up to the doctor, to ICU, the doctor said, "Is there anything I can do to help you?" I said, "Yes. Please, take these contacts out. They're killing me." And they all laughed, but I realized in 7 or 8 minutes without blinking your eyes, you know, your contacts dry out so terribly. I'm sure they were killing my eyes. So I eventually got my contacts out. They moved me up to ICU. And it's only then that I began to understand what a miracle it really was. When I got up there, I began to settle in a little bit. It was a quiet room, and there weren't many people in there, it didn't seem like. And I began to wonder if I had brain damage. You know, I'm smart enough to say, I've been out 7 or 8 minutes, they told me. Wonder if I've still got all my brains. I'm not going to tell the question. So I did a little exercise, you know, just to check and see. I've got all these verses that I try to remember. I try to remember what these verses are, because they're important to me. And so I started reciting them in my mind. It wasn't too long until I said, "I think my brain's okay." And then Dr. Kumar, who's an Indian, they call him the hyper-Hindu. Dr. Kumar came in with this real odd look on his face. And he said, "I've been practicing 13 years, and I've never come into the room where somebody was in VFib for 7 minutes or more and is able to sit up and talk to me and respond to me in any way. It's the first time I've ever seen it.
Praise God.
Never before." Two out of 100 survived what they call the widow maker, which is what it was. It was a widow maker heart attack. Dr. Kumar said he'd never seen anyone survive. My brother Dwayne was talking to Dr. Mayanki, his friend in Richmond, and was telling Dr. Mayanki about the event. And she interrupted his story and said, "Now wait a minute. Before you tell me the rest of this story, if you end up telling me that your brother is alive, he needs to begin to celebrate 2 birthdays a year, because nobody survives that heart attack and lives to tell it." Well, I had to find me a cardiologist here in town. I didn't like that very much. I didn't want a cardiologist. I still don't want a cardiologist. But I found one, and I like him. He's a great guy. And so I went to see him, and he told me, when the receptionist told me that someone was coming to see me that had been in VFib for 7 minutes and was going to walk into the office and was going to talk to me, I said to her, "You are mistaken. I don't know how you've taken that information down incorrectly, but there is no one going to walk into my office and talk to me who has been in VFib for 7 minutes. You have simply taken the information down wrong." Well, when I walked into his office, he looked at me and waved like, "Yeah, that's me." We sat and talked for a little bit, and he basically said, "You can resume your exercises. Don't go full speed, but you can resume your exercises." So I've done that, and I'm going to be committed to that a little more. We talked a little more about what I did for a living, and at the end of the day, he said to me, "Never met anybody that could come and talk to me after this experience before." He said, "I want to tell you, you got a good boss." I said, "Yeah, I do. You got a good boss." I don't know if those are the words of faith speaking or not, but I know that Dr. Sharma believed that God intervened, and there was a mark in that event that said God did something here. And that sign, that mark, is what we call a miracle. Well, I'm up in ICU now, and I'm running you all over the page and beginning to have some visitors. Kids came up, and it was good to see them. They drove too fast to get there, but I can't do nothing about that. and the kids came up to see me, and my friend from the Y came up, my new friend from the Y, Della, and Della was so happy to see me. I mean, she just was all over herself. She's so happy to see me that I was alive. She really just was tickled to death that I was alive. I thought it was funny. It's one of the funny things of this story. She said, "Can I give you a kiss?" I said, "Well, why not? You've already been kissing me for 10 years." So we did. I wasn't hungry. Did have 2 or 3 sips of good hot coffee through a straw. I don't necessarily recommend that. About 11 o'clock, I had about a half of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and it was good. Next morning, they took me to St. Joe's East in Lexington to a heart cath, and I loved it. The girls, this is what I love. You can't laugh yet. The girls that came to the YMCA were the same 2 girls that came to transport me to Lexington. Lauren and Marissa. And they were so happy. They said, "You remember me?" And I'm like, and then the blonde began to get a little closer, and I thought, "Yeah, I may remember you." And they were so happy I was alive. And they wanted to stop on the way to Super America and get a lottery ticket. Anita said, "You better not do that because you'll have to have a cup of coffee." That's true. So they took me to Lexington, and they put 3 stents in a row in my LAD, which is left anterior descending artery, and I remember that process just a little bit. Some of you have had that done. I've walked with a lot of people through it, but they leave you awake during all that. A lot of you know that. And so I'm laying there, and he's working away, and I can tell he's working. I mean, he's pulling the wires out. One time he pulls it out and throws it out on the floor. I'm thinking, so I asked the nurse, I said, is everything going okay? And Dr. Kumar said, "Give him a little more juice." So, he managed to get 3 stents in a row in that bad artery, and sent me back to the waiting area there, and by 5 o'clock that day they sent me home. And the only thing I really had to take home was a rib cage that I felt like somebody had run over with a tractor and trailer, and it was really, really sore, and I didn't want to cough. I still don't want to. I don't want to laugh. I still don't want to. But other than that, I think it's okay. And I know I experienced a miracle. And I want to talk to you just a little bit more about that. I'm not going to take too long. I've wondered today what you would come here looking for, listening to hear about. First of all, I'm so honored you're here. Some of my friends are here. Some young people are here. Some older people are here. Some of my family are here. And I'm so honored you're here. But I wonder what you might be looking for. And I want to offer just 3 or 4 things at the end of this story. That there were lots of miracles along the way. Part of the miracle was my family. You may need to reconsider the miracle of your family. Anita managed to hold it all together. I don't know how, but she did. And she kept her cool when she talked to my mom. She even made my mother not run the stoplights in downtown Richmond, which was a good idea, And she talked to her kids and got them there safely. But all the way to the hospital, which is not far in a small town, my brothers were working down Water Street, and so as my mom drove down Water Street, there's Gary standing out by the road, and he's waving. And she said, "We're going to the hospital with Harry." He got in the car and came. Got to the top of the hill, and there's my brother Randy. And they stopped and said, "Hey, Harry's going to the hospital." He got in the car and came. Joy and Juanita were driving past the hospital at that time. They turned around and came back, so that by the time my mother arrived, my wife arrived at the hospital, 3 of my brothers were there. She didn't have to be alone. We didn't have to be alone. And it's a huge, huge gift of my family. I absolutely love it. My brother from Florida called and said, I'm coming up. Well, you expect that, wouldn't you? You know? Maybe not. But this is what I love, and maybe it's awkward, but I love. He turned to his wife Jennifer and said, I'm leaving in 20 minutes. If you can be ready and want to go, that's fine. If you can't, I'm leaving in 20 minutes. Something about that. That's family. You know, that's family. I love that. And the whole experience of my family in this process has been wonderful. One little clip that I love. Tuesday morning, I was going for that heart cath, and some of my brothers were already there. They were in the parking lot when the ambulance came pulled in and was unloading me and all that. And we were unloading out of the ambulance, these two girls, and I was a little nervous they might drop me, but they didn't. They did fine, you know. I'm like, and I also said, please take these bumps easy. You're killing me, you know. So anyway, and we were just coming out of the van, and I heard a whistle. You know, I got 4 brothers. And there's a way that you know we're around. There's a distinct whistle. And so I heard a whistle. And I told Marissa and Lauren, I said, one of my brothers is here, I know it. And I went, and we communicated across the parking lot. And I'm sure they thought, this guy is crazy. But it was wonderful to know they were there. My brother Rick said he tells the people of his church all the time, the day of my funeral comes, most of you won't be there, but my family will be there. Don't miss the miracle of your family. It's easy for me to say that today because I don't take it nearly as for granted as I did a week ago, 2 weeks ago. Don't miss the miracle of your family. It's a powerful, wonderful thing. Well, another thing I want you to know, hugely important, and this may be the message of the whole day for me, is God uses people. WHAS, somebody called them, I don't know who it was. This is okay. So they came this morning and did a little interview in my office, and the lady said, what about all those times and situations where this kind of miracle doesn't occur? How do you explain what happened? I said, I can tell you how I explain it. God's people were in the right place and did just exactly what they were supposed to do. I'll tell you today, had it not been for the people in that YMCA, my body would already be 6 feet under the ground, and I would be dead as a doornail. Well, the woman at the receptionist desk and a man coming out of the shower room said, we'll do our part until the EMTs get here, so that this man will have a chance to live. And it was ugly. And you know, I'm going to take a moment to do this at the risk of being embarrassed. I invited both those guys to come. And so Della, who did the mouth-to-mouth, we're on a personal basis. And Gary Ford, who is, you just feel like, okay, I'll always be indebted to these people because God uses it. I want you to just stand up for a second. You give them a hand. It so reminds me as a church. You know how the work of God gets done? You do it. You know what happened if they hadn't done it? I'd have been dead. I'm just telling you right now, those 2 people right there, and Mike and B.J. Herndon, who carried the burden in prayer, if they had not done the work of God that day, I'd have been dead. People around us. Listen, guys, the world is dependent upon us. I went to see Gary and Jamie, his wife, over on Woodland. They live on the same street my grandma used to live on. And we just had a great visit together. Gary gave me a little quote that he'd received from Miss Lovell, who used to own Best Lovell Hardware Store in Richmond. Miss Lovell said this, just a simple quote. All the love that God imparts must come from the human hearts. No other place for it to come from, guys. No other place for it to come from. If you've ever heard the call to be the people of God, please hear it today. Because if the work is not done, the people perish all the time. Huge miracle to understand that. Not only these guys, but Sean and Regina and Melissa and Dr. Kumar and Danetta and Yolanda and Becca and Arnetta, those people that were being paid. They were paid to be nurses and doctors. They were so gracious and kind and compassionate and gentle and tender and loving. And I'm telling you, God used them in a great way. God uses them. Important. A couple other things real quick. I'm trying to wrap this up. 3 or 4 more things, really. I don't want you to miss the whole story. Monday had a heart attack. Tuesday had a hard cast. Tuesday night came home. Wednesday morning, what do? Same thing you do every Wednesday morning. Get up and go to the garage, right? Alarm went off at 5. Then you just do what you do. So I got up, made a pot of coffee, went to the garage. That's my place of prayer, for those of you that don't know. Sat out there and thought, okay. Sat down, I had 3 or 4 good hot sips of coffee and said, okay, Lord, now what? And it's all pretty much past me. He told me a couple of things. No, I didn't hear voices, but he told me a couple of things. Number one, he said, I'm caring for everybody just as carefully as I just cared for you. So I want to tell you, you think I got good time and you think I got good attention from the Lord? I did. You think I had good help? I did. But I want you to know, Jesus cares just as much about you and your situation and your details as he does about mine. One of the things that I love is Jim Wade has really encouraged me in this process. Jim, Sherry's husband, had a major heart collapse here, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, and had to be shocked back and all that. And Jim's called me 2 or 3 times just to encourage me, and it's been very helpful. Sherry told me when they were coming up Dixie Highway, and she decided to stop at that Southwest Hospital to take Jim in there because it was obvious he wasn't doing well. And there his heart had to be shot back, and the nurse said, when you came to the hospital, all the right people were there. Said even an EMT that had brought somebody else to the hospital was there. They needed a big, strong guy to do chest compressions, and there he was. He left that aside. It just so reinforced my understanding. I want to tell you today, Jesus knows and cares about the smallest detail of your life as well as mine. And I want to encourage you in that today. You really challenged me too, because I've been hanging on to a passage of Scripture, and I'll be done pretty quick. I'm hanging on to this passage of Scripture. It's actually in Romans 14:12. Romans 14:12 says something like this: at the end of the day, everybody's going to be accountable to God. Well, that was like a get-out-of-jail-free card for me. Because that says, you know what? Ultimately, it's between you and God, and I'm out of the mix. I mean, I'd use that passage to encourage myself that basically, at the end of the day, it's not my responsibility. So I really built myself, but I began to, somehow that Wednesday morning, I read that passage again, and it didn't say that at all. Let me read a little bit of it. It says, well, who are you to pass judgment on the servants of another? It is before their own Lord that people will stand or fall, and they will be upheld, for the Lord is able to make them stand. Why do you pass judgment on your brother or sister? Or you, why do you despise your brother or your sister? For we will all stand before the judgment seat of God, for it is written, as I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue give praise to God. So each of us will be accountable for the way we deal with others before God. So I'm not near as pushy today. You are the Lord's servants, and He will help you to stand. He knows about every detail of your life. 2 more things quickly. By Thursday night, I had a hard time sleeping because I hurt so much. So Mark and Becky Wells, Jenna's mom and dad, loaned me the medical chair. That is a recliner that everybody that's ever been sick in their family has slept in. So we brought it over to the house. Put it up in the bedroom, and I'm trying to get comfortable in a medical chair. It's like, oh, every time I turn any direction, Gary Ford, it hurt me so bad. I hugged him in the house, and he felt like the back end of a mule. I said, no wonder I'm hurting, So trying to get comfortable in the medical chair. It's like I dozed off, and I woke up, and the Lord gave me a little revelation. He said, you know what? It's either A or B. I thought it was a silly little illustration, but I used to take exams, multiple choice, and they'd say, hot water, is it on the left or the right, A or B? That's pretty easy, right? A or B. But my life had always been, is it A or B? I always wanted to add C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. And anytime I wanted to make a decision about anything, it seemed like I would complicate it and make 29 different options. And the Lord said, you know what? Forget all that. Simplify the whole thing. It's either A or B. You're in or you're out. It's that way with Christianity. It's not A, B, C, D, F, it's either A or B. You're in or you're out. I'm going to do what He wants me to do or I'm not. Amen. Good preaching. All right. Thank you. Sometimes I have to encourage myself, so it's either A or B. It was interesting that night when I'd say, do I need to get back in bed? I'd say, it's either A or B. I'm either going to or I'm not. And life got awfully simple. I'm hoping it'll stay that simple. And I hope you'll understand. When you start adding C's and D's and E's and F's and G's and all them excuses, and I'm going to do it half-hearted, and I'm going to do it on Thursday, and I'm not going to do it today. It's either A or B. That's where we are with Jesus today. It's either A or B. Isn't that right? Pretty simple. One more. That is, a number of Christmases ago, I had a red bow experience. And I told you guys about it. I was in my bedroom upstairs remembering a very difficult memory from being a kid. Probably the memory was at least 35 years old. And I don't know why I was remembering. It was just one of those things you didn't want to remember. It was around Christmas time, and it was a memory I didn't cherish, but I remember it involved my dad, and he was being drunk at a time I didn't want him to be drunk, and all kinds of stuff. And I found him in this old barn in the stripping room. You know what a stripping room is, where you strip the leaves off tobacco. And it was quiet and cold, and there wasn't nobody there but him. Stooped down in the corner with an old hat on, drunk as a skunk. And it was Christmas Eve. I thought, this is tragic. And I was reviewing that in my mind and all the pain of it. And I remember when I reviewed it, on the pillar of that barn was a big red bow. And I said to the Lord, Lord, I don't know what that means, but this is not a gift to me. And He said, I was there. I watched the whole thing. I knew everything that went on. I knew every detail. I knew everything about what happened that evening. I was there. I was there. And now, anytime I go back to that old barn, you can't go back to that old barn with that red bow still. You see, the Lord has ability not only to heal your body, but to heal your memories. And so I went back to the YMCA, and I carried my big red bow, and I laid it right on the floor where my body lay. And I said, took me a little picture and put it on Facebook. Jesus, I said, you know what? I know you were there. And with that, I have great hope. I haven't thought much about what might have happened. I haven't thought much about the negative. I haven't worried too much about where Anita's going to move if I had to leave. I didn't cross my mind. We're not worried about tomorrow too much. I'm just celebrating the fact that God has given me a chance to live again. I'm reminded of one other thing, then I'm almost done, and that is, there's only one thing I think the Lord has taught me that is contagious about Christianity, and that's joy. Joy. And I have joy today to be alive and be here with you. Thanks be to God. I'm glad to see Yancey today. Yancey, you bring me joy today. Glad you're here. And I'm going to close in a minute and have my friend Gene Wells come say a closing prayer. But before I do, I just want to encourage you that God's a God of miracles. And it's not always some outlandish, exceptional, out of the ordinary break in from the outside. Sometimes it's just God doing His work through His people, day after day after day. And you wake up and say, wow, something was good about this. The mark of His presence is on this event. When that happens, you can say with deep assurance, I have just seen a miracle. One more little thing, and I'm going to let Gina come up and close in prayer. That is, I hope I'm giving you enough time to reflect. My grandma had a heart problem. My mom's mom. My grandpa had a heart problem. My mom's dad. And so she was on the front porch one morning, having had this heart problem with a young family. And the Lord told her, I want to take care of it. Now, the Lord didn't tell me that. I didn't hear that, but He took care of me. So the Lord told her, I'm going to take care of you. And so she believed God and lived for 50 more years. So I'll see you at 106.